I never thought I'd be hiding in my own pantry at 7:30 in the morning, but here I was taking deep breaths while clutching my coffee mug like a lifeline. Through the door, I could hear my mother-in-law Margaret's voice growing increasingly shrill as she lectured my children about proper breakfast table behavior. Emily, a young lady does not reach across the table like that. And Lucas, for heaven's sake, stop drumming with your spoon. This is exactly what I'm talking about, Amanda. These children have no structure, no discipline. I closed my eyes and counted to 10, reminding myself that Margaret was only staying with us for 2 more weeks while her house underwent renovations. Just 14 more days. I could handle this. I had to. The sound of a chair scraping against the floor made me wince. But Grandma, my 8-year-old Emily protested. I was just trying to get the syrup before it dripped on the... No excuses. A proper young lady asks for items to be passed. And Lucas, sit up straight this instant. My 6-year-old son's quiet sniffle was all it took. I emerged from the pantry, plastering on what I hoped was a neutral expression. Kids, why don't we go get ready for school? Don't forget to brush your teeth. Emily and Lucas practically bolted from the table, leaving their half-eaten breakfast behind. Margaret's lips pressed into a thin line as she watched them go, her steel-gray hair perfectly coiffed despite the early hour. She'd probably been up since dawn, ironing her clothes and applying her makeup with military precision. Amanda, she began, turning those ice-blue eyes on me. We need to discuss your children's behavior. This chaos cannot continue. I busied myself clearing the breakfast dishes, trying to keep my voice level. They're just being kids, Margaret. It's normal for them to be energetic in the morning. Normal? She practically spat the word. There is nothing normal about their wild behavior. In my day, children knew how to conduct themselves properly. My David never would have dared. Mom. My husband's voice cut through her tirade as he entered the kitchen, already dressed for work in his doctor's scrubs. It's too early for this. Margaret's expression softened immediately as she looked at her son. David, darling, I'm simply trying to help. These children need structure, discipline. The way Amanda lets them run wild. She shook her head sadly. Why, just yesterday I saw Lucas playing in the mud after school. In his good clothes, and Emily? Reading comic books instead of proper literature. I gripped the edge of the sink, remembering the joy on Lucas's face as he showed me the tiny ecosystem he created in our backyard. How Emily's eyes lit up as she described the latest adventure of her favorite superhero. They're happy, healthy kids, I said quietly. They're doing well in school. They have friends, They're out of control. Margaret stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. And if you won't do something about it, I will. I've already spoken to my friend Barbara. She's a social worker, about my concerns. The room went silent. Even David, who'd been pouring his coffee, froze mid-motion. You did what? I whispered, turning to face her. Margaret lifted her chin defiantly. Someone needs to look out for these children's best interests. Your permissive parenting is damaging them. They need proper guidance, structure, discipline. That's enough. David's voice was sharp as he set down his coffee mug. Mom, you had no right to. I have every right. Margaret's voice rose. I am their grandmother. I won't stand by and watch as they're raised without any proper values or discipline. Why, just look at this house. Toys everywhere, art supplies cluttering the dining room, that ridiculous creativity corner in the living room. Children need boundaries, not this endless freedom to make messes and question everything. My hands were shaking as I dried them on a dish towel. Margaret, I appreciate that you care about the kids, but... Care? Of course I care. That's why I've already called the private academy where Barbara's grandchildren attend. They have an excellent behavioral modification program. With proper discipline and structure, maybe there's still hope for. Mom. David's sharp voice cut through her speech. You need to stop. Now. But Margaret was on a roll. She pulled out her phone, tapping furiously. Look at these statistics about children raised without proper discipline. The delinquency rates, the behavioral problems. Amanda, if you won't listen to reason, then perhaps it's time for more drastic measures. Barbara says. Actually, I interrupted, my voice surprisingly steady despite the storm of emotions inside me. I think it's time we read something else. I walked to the kitchen drawer where I'd been keeping a particular envelope. One I found last week while helping David sort through some old family papers. Margaret frowned as I pulled out the yellowed envelope. What is that? A letter, I said quietly, from your mother, written to your father in 1962, about a certain little girl who refused to sit still at the dinner table, who climbed trees in her Sunday best, who asked too many questions in school. The color drained from Margaret's face. Where did you get that? It was in that box of old papers from the attic. There are quite a few letters, actually. Your mother had quite a lot to say about raising a spirited child. I held the envelope out to her. Maybe you'd like to read them before we continue this discussion about proper childhood behavior. Margaret's hands trembled slightly as she took the envelope. For the first time since she'd moved in, I saw a crack in her perfect composure. I haven't seen these in years. I didn't even know they still existed. Read them, I said gently. And then, if you still want to talk about the children's behavior, we can. Just then, Emily and Lucas came thundering down the stairs, backpacks bouncing. Mom, we're ready. I turned to my children, taking in their slightly rumpled clothes, Emily's messy ponytail, Lucas's untucked shirt. They were perfect in their imperfection, vibrant with life and energy and curiosity. Have a good day at school, loves, I said, hugging them both. As they headed for the door, I caught Margaret staring at them, the envelope clutched in her hands, an unreadable expression on her face. David touched my shoulder gently. I'll drop them off on my way to the hospital, he said, then turned to his mother. Mom, just read the letters, okay. Margaret nodded slowly, still staring at the envelope as if it might bite her. As my family left for the day, I saw her sink into a kitchen chair, carefully opening the first letter with trembling fingers. Sometimes, I thought, the past has a way of teaching us exactly what we need to learn about the present. I spent the morning cleaning the house, trying to keep my hands busy while my mind raced. Margaret hadn't emerged from her room since reading the first letter. The sound of occasional drawers opening and closing told me she was still up there, presumably going through more of her mother's writings. Around noon, I heard her footsteps on the stairs. When she appeared in the kitchen doorway, I almost dropped the plate I was drying. Margaret's perfectly styled hair was disheveled, her makeup slightly smudged, as if she'd been wiping her eyes. In her hands, she clutched a stack of letters and what looked like an old photo album. I found this too, she said softly, her voice lacking its usual sharp edge. In the box with the letters. I'd forgotten. She placed the album on the kitchen table with trembling hands. Cautiously, as if approaching a wounded animal, I sat down across from her. Margaret opened the album to reveal a black and white photograph of a little girl, perhaps 7 or 8, covered head to toe in mud but grinning widely at the camera. That's you. I asked, though I already knew the answer, the same ice-blue eyes, even then full of life and mischief. Margaret nodded, tracing the photograph with a fingertip. Mother was furious that day. I'd ruined my new dress playing in the creek behind our house. I was supposed to be practicing my piano lessons, but I discovered a family of newts and she trailed off, lost in the memory. What happened? I prompted gently. Father took this picture before Mother could send me to clean up. He said. Her voice caught. He said he wanted to remember me exactly as I was, joy and mud and all. She turned the page to reveal more photos. Young Margaret climbing trees, conducting science experiments in the kitchen, putting on plays with neighborhood children. Your mother's letters, I ventured carefully. They seem to tell a similar story. Margaret's hands shook as she picked up one of the letters. Mother was like me, like I've become, she corrected herself with a bitter laugh. Always worried about appearances, about proper behavior. But Father, she unfolded the letter. May I read you something? I nodded, and she began to read aloud. My dearest John, I fear I'm doing it all wrong with Margaret. Today I scolded her again for asking too many questions in school, for disrupting the class with her endless curiosity. But when I saw her little face crumple, when I watched her try to shrink herself to meet my expectations, I remembered my own childhood. How many times did I silence my own questions, hide my own passion for learning, all in the name of being a proper young lady? Are we dooming our daughter to the same fate? Margaret's voice broke on the last words. She looked up at me, her eyes swimming with tears. I became my mother, she whispered. Worse than my mother, even. She at least questioned herself. I've been so certain, so righteous in my beliefs about proper behavior, about discipline. A small noise from the doorway made us both turn. Emily stood there, clutching her backpack, with Lucas half hidden behind her. I glanced at the clock. Early dismissal day. I'd completely forgotten. Mom. Emily's voice was uncertain. Is Grandma okay? Before I could respond, Margaret did something that shocked me to my core. She opened her arms. Come here, both of you. Please? My children hesitated, looking to me for reassurance. I nodded, and they cautiously approached their grandmother. Margaret pulled them close, something I'd never seen her do before. I'm so sorry, she whispered into their hair. I'm so sorry. Lucas pulled back slightly, studying his grandmother's face with concern. Why are you crying, Grandma? Margaret laughed softly, wiping her eyes. Because I just remembered something very important that I'd forgotten for a very long time. She reached for the photo album. Would you like to see some pictures of when I was your age? Emily's eyes widened as she saw the mud-covered girl in the photograph. That's you. It is indeed, Margaret smiled, and for the first time since she'd moved in, it reached her eyes. Would you believe I once kept pet newts in my bedroom? Drove my mother absolutely crazy. Really? Lucas perked up. Like my beetles? Just like your beetles, darling. Margaret touched his cheek gently. You know, I had quite the insect collection myself, once upon a time. I quietly slipped out of the kitchen, leaving them hunched over the photo album together. Through the doorway, I could hear Emily's delighted giggles as Margaret described some childhood adventure, and Lucas's excited questions about her old bug collection. When David came home that evening, he found all four of us in the backyard. Margaret, her expensive slacks rolled up to her knees, was helping Lucas expand his mud ecosystem, while Emily sketched them both in her art pad. There was dirt under Margaret's perfectly manicured nails, and she didn't seem to care at all. Mom, David said, clearly bewildered by the scene before him. Is everything okay? Margaret looked up, her face streaked with dirt, but somehow younger than I'd ever seen it. No, darling, she said softly. Everything isn't okay, but I think perhaps it's finally going to be. The next 2 weeks passed in a way I never could have imagined. Margaret's transformation wasn't instant. Old habits die hard, after all, but the changes were remarkable. The morning after our photo album revelation, I overheard her canceling her appointment with Barbara, the social worker. I was wrong, she said firmly into the phone. Very, very wrong. One evening, as we sat on the patio watching the kids play, Margaret turned to me with tears in her eyes. I've been thinking about calling that private academy too, she said quietly, to withdraw my inquiry. I squeezed her hand. Already done, I smiled. Right after our talk. She nodded gratefully. I almost ruined everything, didn't I? With my obsession with perfection and proper behavior. But you didn't, I reminded her. You found your way back. Inside the house, we could hear Emily and Lucas arguing over whose turn it was to feed the new class hamster they brought home for the weekend. Before Margaret could react to the rising voices, I saw her take a deep breath and slowly release it. You know, she said thoughtfully, I had a pet hamster once. Kept it in my dollhouse after Mother said no more animals in the house. Father found out but never told her. He'd slipped me extra food for it during dinner. The memory made her smile, and I watched in amazement as she stood up and went inside. Instead of her usual scolding about proper indoor voices, I heard her say, Why don't we make a schedule for taking care of your little friend? I might have some tips from my own secret hamster keeping days. The children's excited chatter that followed warmed my heart. Saturday morning found us all in the kitchen, making what Margaret would have once called an unnecessary mess. Now she was right there with us, helping Emily and Lucas measure ingredients for pancakes. When Lucas accidentally dropped an egg on the floor, I tensed, waiting for the lecture about carelessness. Instead, Margaret laughed. Oh, darling, you should have seen the time I tried to make breakfast for Mother's birthday. Broke every egg in the carton. But you know what? She leaned down to help him clean up. The pancakes we ended up having at the diner that morning were the best I'd ever tasted. Later that day, I found her sitting in Emily's creativity corner, admiring the wild, colorful drawings pinned to the walls. She held one in her hands, a new edition showing a gray-haired woman playing in the mud with a little boy. She captured my essence, don't you think? Margaret chuckled, wiping her eyes. Amanda? Thank you for finding those letters, for helping me remember who I used to be. Thank your mother, I said softly. She knew exactly what you might need to read someday. The day before Margaret's house renovations were finished, she did something none of us expected. She asked David to get the old Super 8 projector from their family home. That evening, we all gathered in the living room, sheets hung as makeshift screens, while Margaret showed us films from her own childhood. We watched young Margaret performing elaborate backyard plays, conducting messy science experiments, and yes, playing with her secret hamster. "I wish I'd known this, you Mom," David said quietly as the last film flickered to an end. Instead of the rigid, controlling mother I became, Margaret finished for him. "I wish you had too. But maybe," she looked at Emily and Lucas, curled up together on the couch, half asleep. "Maybe it's not too late to be that person again. For them." The morning Margaret left, there were tears, real ones, not the polite dabs at eyes I'd expected. Emily and Lucas clung to her, making her promise to come back soon. "Maybe next weekend?" Lucas asked hopefully. "My ecosystem will have new bugs by then. And I'm starting a new comic about a grandma superhero," Emily added. "You could help me with the story." Margaret hugged them tight. "I wouldn't miss it for the world." She turned to me, her eyes bright. "Amanda, I've been thinking. If it's all right with you, I'd like to convert one of my spare rooms for the children. Somewhere they can be themselves when they visit. Maybe make messes, do experiments, create art." "We'd love that," I said, pulling her into a hug. As we watched her car drive away, David put his arm around me. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "I haven't seen her this happy since before Father died. It's like she's finally woken up from a long sleep." That evening, as I helped Lucas add new specimens to his bug collection and listened to Emily describe her superhero grandma comic, I thought about Margaret's journey, about how sometimes the greatest act of love isn't trying to fix people, but remembering that they were never broken in the first place. The following weekend, when Margaret came to visit, she brought her old bug collection journal and a box of dress-up clothes for superhero photo shoots. And if anyone passing by happened to see a respected grandmother playing in the mud or posing in a cape, well, that was perfectly fine with all of us.